I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to leave the truth behind. Those were the opening words of 99-year-old Robert Johnson, recorded in his final interview before his death. For 78 years, he had kept silent about what he witnessed in Antarctica under Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Now, with everyone else gone, he decided the world deserved to know. What Johnson revealed wasn't about aliens or hollow Earth fantasies. It was something more unsettling, evidence of structures that shouldn't exist, missions erased from official records, and men who vanished into the ice and never returned. His testimony, delivered with the calm precision of a man unburdened by fear of consequences, challenges everything we've been told about Operation High Jump. The question isn't whether Johnson is telling the truth. Military veterans who served with him confirm his presence on the expedition. Naval archives, what little remains, verify his assignments. The question is why his story, and the stories of dozens of other witnesses, were systematically buried for nearly 8 decades. If you're ready to hear what the last survivor of Admiral Byrd's most mysterious expedition took to his deathbed, subscribe now. This isn't conspiracy theory, this is testimony. Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd Jr. wasn't just an explorer, he was an American legend. Born into Virginia aristocracy, decorated naval officer, recipient of the Medal of Honor, and the first man to fly over both poles. New York City gave him 3 ticker-tape parades. Presidents shook his hand. The public worshipped him as a symbol of American courage and innovation. His Antarctic expeditions in the late 20s and 30s established him as the foremost polar expert in the world. He built Little America Base on the Ross Ice Shelf, conducted extensive aerial mapping, and survived 5 months alone in a remote weather station in conditions that nearly killed him. Carbon monoxide poisoning left him at death's door, but he emerged more determined than ever. But beneath the public hero image, whispers circulated in naval circles. Byrd's expeditions weren't purely scientific. Strange geological formations, navigation anomalies that defied explanation, and discoveries too sensitive for public consumption. None of this made official reports, but it was enough to keep the government interested. When 19-year-old Robert Johnson met Admiral Byrd at a Norfolk, Virginia naval facility, he expected questions about sailing experience or technical skills. Instead, Byrd asked, "Can you keep a secret? Are you absolutely loyal to the United States?" In that dimly lit room, Johnson realized this wouldn't be an ordinary scientific expedition. Byrd needed quiet, reliable men who would follow orders and never speak of what they saw. Johnson's calm demeanor set him apart from other volunteers who boasted about past adventures. Without fanfare, Byrd selected him. What Johnson didn't know was that he'd just signed on to witness events no history book would ever print. To the public, Antarctica was just frozen wasteland, penguins, seals, and endless ice. But to world powers emerging from World War II, it represented something else entirely: untapped resources, strategic positioning, and secrets buried beneath miles of ice. Scientists suspected vast mineral deposits, coal, oil, uranium, that could power nations for centuries. The continent was larger than the United States and Mexico combined, with no government, no borders, and no internationally recognized claims. Whoever controlled Antarctica could shift the global balance of power. By the time Johnson arrived with Byrd, the landscape itself seemed hostile to human presence. Compasses spun uselessly, failing to point north. Radio signals vanished into static before returning as if nothing happened. The ice itself appeared strange in places, not pure white, but streaked with faint shimmers that glowed from within. During one flight, the Aurora Australis displayed patterns that lasted far longer than natural lights should. Old-timers muttered that the lights were watching them. Officers discouraged such talk but never quite stamped it out completely. Johnson witnessed something that stayed with him for decades: a massive crack in the ice, too deep to see bottom. Warm air rushed out, curling pale mist into the bitter cold. Standing at the edge, he felt faint vibration, almost like distant machinery humming beneath his feet. Nothing in his training prepared him for that. These bizarre readings, strange geological features, and unexplained phenomena were quietly recorded, classified, and sent to Washington. For strategists far from the ice, it represented a puzzle, and possibly an opportunity. Antarctica was becoming a contested zone in the shadow struggle for global power. Operation High Jump launched in winter. Officially described as a training exercise to test equipment in extreme cold and map uncharted coastline. But the numbers told a different story: 14 ships including aircraft carriers and destroyers, 33 aircraft, over 4,700 personnel, tanks, tracked vehicles, and enough weapons to outfit an invasion force. You don't send that kind of firepower to count penguins. Robert Johnson, now in his 20s, was called to serve under Byrd again. From boarding the ship, he sensed something different. The atmosphere was disciplined, almost brittle, as if everyone understood the operation extended beyond mapping ice. Orders were adamant, movements tracked, and the crew seemed to await contact with something, or someone. Rumors about Nazi activity in Antarctica had circulated since the war's end. Intelligence briefs mentioned geothermal oases, areas of open water and warmth within the ice that could harbor entire facilities. German vessels allegedly slipped south in late 1945, heading for hidden bases in polar wilderness. The Navy wasn't taking chances. Once the fleet established position in Antarctic waters, operations had two layers. First were public activities, mapping runs and weather studies. Then came quieter operations given in person by senior officers, bypassing normal communication channels. Some aircraft took off on unexplained missions not scheduled on flight plans, returning hours later with crews who neither confirmed nor denied what they'd observed. Johnson's unit received orders to support a ground team heading toward mountainous regions marked unstable in earlier surveys. Snow had melted in distinctly geometric patterns, as if something beneath the ice radiated heat. Johnson never forgot loading gear that day. There was awareness we were stepping into the unknown. The team never came back. Officially listed as lost due to crevasse collapse during deteriorating weather, but Johnson knew the weather had been clear that day. The story didn't match what men on the ground witnessed. Almost immediately, the mood changed. Reports increased. Entire areas became off-limits without explanation. Then, suddenly, Operation High Jump ended after only 8 weeks. What was planned as a 6 to 8 month mission terminated during peak Antarctic summer conditions. There's a gap in Operation High Jump's official record: 3 hours when Admiral Byrd vanished from radio contact during routine flight. The logs list his takeoff and return, but the middle is empty silence. For 3 hours, no word from Byrd, no location updates, no telemetry. As if the aircraft had been swallowed by white wilderness. Then a document began circulating, claimed to be Byrd's private diary. In it, the Admiral describes flying over a lush green valley with forest-covered slopes and winding rivers. In Antarctica. He wrote that instruments screamed, compass needles spun, gyroscopes died. The sun disappeared. Then he saw movement below, enormous creatures with shaggy fur and curved tusks. Mammoths. He dropped altitude for better view. What followed was more unusual: a city glowing with crystalline structures and rainbow light. Aerial vehicles, sleek disc-shaped crafts, glided at unearthly speeds alongside his propeller-driven plane. They carried strange markings and maneuvered with impossible precision. According to the diary, a voice came over his radio, not from the carrier ship. It spoke English with an unfamiliar accent: "Fear not. Follow us. Prepare to land." His plane stopped responding, descending on its own toward the shimmering city. Byrd claimed tall, pale beings led him into a crystal hall where, the master, warned about humanity's dangerous path after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The warning: stop or be destroyed. Critics dismissed the diary as fabricated, no strong evidence it's in Byrd's handwriting, and the style seems theatrical. But fragments align with what Johnson later revealed. Johnson remembered Byrd returning from that solo flight utterly shaken, refusing to specify his flight path. That same day, Johnson was pulled aside for extra security detail around ice marked restricted. Johnson recognized whispers about an off-limits location Byrd visited that wasn't on any official map. His own unrecorded missions would reveal structures that weren't supposed to exist, structures destroyed within days. Not long after Byrd's unexplained flight, Johnson received orders unlike any before. No written record. No inclusion on assignment sheets. An officer delivered them face to face, tone clipped, eyes revealing nothing. Johnson and fewer than 24 men geared up for rapid air deployment to coordinates that made no sense, not on any map Johnson had seen. The aircraft took them deep into the interior, far from Little America Base. From above, the landscape appeared as unbroken white expanse, until it wasn't. Approaching the drop point, Johnson noticed a massive ice ridge that didn't glisten under sunlight. Its surface looked dull, almost metallic. Upon landing, everything felt different. Temperature was noticeably warmer, not balmy, but enough that breath didn't freeze immediately. Most eerie was the low vibration in the air, so faint it teetered on imperceptible, but steady enough for men to exchange glances. Johnson later described it as distant machinery humming through ground rather than air. At the ridge bottom, they found their objective, a long, narrow fissure with perfectly clean edges, as if cut by a massive blade. Around it, snow had melted in straight geometric patterns, nothing like random natural thawing. Inside, the fissure opened into a tunnel of smooth, curved material that seemed as ancient as it was engineered. Orders were simple: investigate but do not enter. That rule lasted 10 minutes. One officer clipped his safety line and slipped into the opening. Men outside waited as minutes stretched into uneasy silence, until the rope went slack. No signal. No movement. The man was gone. Another officer volunteered, firmly binding his safety line. He descended, and for a moment it seemed routine until the line snapped taut, then shook violently. They hauled him back up, conscious but utterly unresponsive. Eyes open, staring at nothing, lips slightly parted but unmoving. He never spoke another word for the rest of his life. That was enough. Immediate withdrawal. They boarded the aircraft without collecting samples or taking measurements. Johnson's questions got long, hard looks and silence that meant he shouldn't ask again. What Johnson witnessed next proved someone had been there long before them. Late in Operation High Jump, Johnson received orders for security detail at what he was told was a former weather station embedded in the ice. He expected crushed metal shacks. Instead, he found a stairway, perfectly carved, descending into the glacier itself. The steps were smooth, uniform, constructed of concrete. "I know concrete when I see it," Johnson stated flatly in his interview. And this wasn't built by any Antarctic research team. They stood watch for 2 nights. On the 3rd morning, an officer arrived, took photographs, and attempted to descend. He didn't get far. The next day, he was gone, discharged, flown home immediately, never heard from again. Those photographs never appeared in any archive. Johnson also remembered the night Admiral Byrd entered the communications tent, face pale, hands trembling. He refused to log the flight path he'd just completed. "You were there," Byrd told Johnson quietly. "You know what we saw. Never forget it." Then the Admiral walked out, leaving those words hanging in cold air. When asked if he believed what they found was extraterrestrial, Johnson hesitated. "I don't know. It could have been something ancient. Maybe we didn't build it. Maybe we just found it. But it wasn't natural. And it wasn't ours." Days after discovering the concrete stairway, the entire site was bombed under the guise of a test. The location was wiped off the surface, erased deliberately. Johnson watched as the area was methodically destroyed, ensuring nothing remained for future expeditions to find. When Operation High Jump ended abruptly, something else disappeared: the paper trail. Reports that should have been archived never arrived at destinations. Flight logs were incomplete or missing altogether. Reconnaissance photographs vanished in transit. Personnel rosters for certain assignments came back altered, entire names quietly removed, as if those men never set foot on ice. Johnson sensed the deliberate effort to close the curtain. Conversations aboard ships became shorter, eyes more guarded. Normal mess hall banter after missions was replaced with silence or sudden topic changes when wrong people walked in. The official explanation was dry and unconvincing: severe weather, logistical strain, mission complete. No one explained why an operation designed for 6 to 8 months suddenly packed up after barely 8 weeks during peak Antarctic summer, the best time for southern operations. Admiral Byrd held one press conference in South America before disappearing for months. In it, he gave an unusual warning: the United States must prepare to defend against a new enemy that can fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. That remark made headlines for one day, then was quietly buried. It was the last time Byrd said anything provocative in public. Cleanup operations were thorough. Johnson remembered photographs taken during aerial runs, images of massive geometric shapes etched into ice like tops of buried structures. Some showed what looked like doors set into sheer ice walls. Those photos were labeled classified and locked away. Within months, they simply vanished. Written records about anomalous terrain were destroyed or classified indefinitely. Complete incident reports about missing teams disappeared from Navy records. Johnson knew one officer who tried keeping personal copies of certain documents. The man was silently fired and escorted out without being allowed to pack his belongings. The Antarctic Treaty was signed, turning the continent into peaceful scientific territory while forbidding military advancement and resource exploitation. To Johnson, it was something else: they didn't sign that to protect penguins. They signed it to make sure nobody else went looking where we'd been. Admiral Byrd never fully recovered from what he witnessed in Antarctica. In his final years, he became increasingly withdrawn, speaking only about safe subjects like weather and base construction. But those close to him noted the change, a heaviness, as if he carried knowledge too dangerous to share. Before his death, Byrd allegedly made one final statement, recorded but never officially released: that land beyond the pole is the center of the great unknown. I can say little more, but I urge all who can hear, watch Antarctica. What we found there will either save humanity or destroy it. The choice won't be ours to make. The recording disappeared from naval archives shortly after his death. Only fragments remained in personal collections of family members who later spoke anonymously about the Admiral's final warnings. Johnson believed Byrd died knowing the truth would be buried with him. He tried to warn people, but they shut him down. After that press conference in South America, someone had a serious talk with him. He never spoke freely again. The pattern of silence extended beyond Byrd. Other expedition members who attempted to share their experiences faced career destruction, sudden transfers to remote postings, or worse. Some died in accidents that raised questions but generated no investigations. The message was clear: speak about what you saw, and pay the price. One aspect of Johnson's testimony that troubled researchers most was his mention of structures that appeared pre-existing, not natural formations, but constructed facilities that predated American presence. Intelligence briefs about German activity in Antarctica weren't just rumor. Historical records confirmed that Nazi Germany conducted Antarctic expeditions throughout the late 30s. They claimed vast territories, naming them New Swabia, and conducted extensive aerial surveys. U-boats were known to have made trips to southern waters during and after the war, with several never returning to German ports. Some historians believe the Nazis established hidden bases in Antarctica's interior, possibly using geothermal heat sources to create habitable zones within the ice. Whether these bases remained occupied after Germany's defeat remains unknown, but Operation Highjump's military scale suggests U.S. forces expected potential hostile contact. Johnson never claimed to see Nazi personnel, but he described facilities that showed signs of recent use, equipment that hadn't weathered decades of Antarctic conditions, structures that appeared maintained rather than abandoned. The concrete stairway, in particular, bore construction techniques consistent with German engineering of that era. Today, Antarctica remains the most restricted continent on Earth. While presented as open scientific territory, vast regions are off-limits even to researchers. Military flights are forbidden under the Antarctic Treaty, yet reconnaissance satellites regularly photograph the continent. When questioned about specific anomalies visible in satellite imagery, governments claim natural formations or research stations. But researchers have documented strange occurrences. Massive heat signatures detected deep beneath ice where no volcanic activity should exist. Magnetic anomalies that scramble instruments in specific locations. Reports from scientists at research stations about restricted zones that require special clearance even for personnel with top-secret credentials. Some expeditions have returned with stories similar to Johnson's, tunnels discovered then quickly sealed, structures glimpsed but never officially documented, and pressure from governmental agencies to sign non-disclosure agreements. Scientists who speak publicly about unusual findings often face funding cuts or career obstacles that silence further investigation. The Antarctic Treaty, celebrated as model for international cooperation, also ensures no independent investigations can occur. Every expedition requires governmental approval. Every discovery must be reported to treaty authorities. Nothing leaves Antarctica without documentation and inspection. Johnson believed the treaty was designed specifically to prevent public discovery of what Operation High Jump found. They locked the door and threw away the key. Nobody's getting down there to dig up the truth, not without permission from the very people who buried it. In his final recorded interview, Robert Johnson delivered a message he'd carried for 78 years. His voice was weathered but steady, his eyes clear despite age. "I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to leave the truth behind." He spoke about structures that shouldn't exist, missions erased from records, and men lost to silence, some forever, others to living silence more disturbing than death. He described how sites were deliberately destroyed within days of discovery, ensuring nothing remained for history to examine. "What we don't know about Antarctica is far greater than what we do," Johnson stated. "And what we do know, what I saw with my own eyes, is enough to change everything we understand about human history. Someone else was there before us. Whether they were human, whether they're still there, I can't say. But they left things behind that governments decided the world wasn't ready to see." When asked why he finally chose to speak, Johnson's answer was simple: everyone else is gone. The men who gave the orders, the officers who enforced silence, the admiral who saw things he couldn't explain, all dead. I'm the last one left. If I don't speak now, the truth dies with me. And I won't do that to humanity. Johnson passed away months after giving his testimony. His family reported that in his final weeks, he expressed relief at having unburdened himself, but also concern that his words would be dismissed or ignored. "I did what I could," he told his grandson. "The rest is up to those who listen." His testimony has been corroborated by declassified documents, personal journals of other expedition members, and naval records that survived the purge. While mainstream historians remain skeptical, the consistency of details across multiple sources suggests Johnson told the truth as he experienced it. The question isn't whether Robert Johnson lied, the evidence supports his presence and participation in Operation High Jump's most mysterious assignments. The question is what really lies beneath Antarctic ice, and why governments have spent 78 years ensuring we never find out.